And back to the blue.
More blue. In case of the removal of the president from office, or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president, and the Congress may by law provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both of the president and vice president, declaring what officer shall then act as president, and such officer shall act accordingly until the disability be removed, or a president shall be elected. So, this got put in blue because it got rearranged. I'm turning off notification settings because there we go. Hopefully now I will stop getting them. This got changed because it became clear that it was insufficient. When William Henry Harrison died, in 30 days, as The Simpsons reminds us, he was succeeded by John Tyler, who, as we previously established, was the first president born under the Constitution. And his nickname as president was His Accidency. Because he wasn't elected president, he was elected vice president, and then Harrison became the first president to die in office. And we kind of puttered along like that for a long time, where it wasn't, officially set how things were going to go, but it was how we were doing things. And it's worth noting that Tyler didn't have a vice president. So if Tyler had died, they would have had to have figured something else out. And then in the 20th century, we got, well, first off, not frequently talked about, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson had a stroke while in office. And his first lady, Edith Wilson, who he married while he was president, was running the country for at least a few months while he was recovering. She would tell people that she would take things into him, and obviously he couldn't see too many people because it was bad for his recovery and blah, blah, blah. And so she would take them in and she would get them signed, and then she would leave again and things would all be taken care of. Well, the thing is, I don't know if you've ever interacted with anybody who's recovering from a stroke, but they're not running the country in the first few months.
Yeah, my mom had a partial stroke. She recovered very quickly, but we could tell during the middle. I was there when she was having it, and you could tell.
Yeah. And his was apparently quite severe. So she was in charge. Nobody admitted it, but it's generally accepted by historians that for a while she was running the country. And this was during World War I. And people didn't talk a lot about that, but it was clear, to people in the know that had been a thing that had happened. And of course, FDR went through many periods of varying physical health. And then he died, and Truman became president during World War II. Now, it was the tail end of World War II, but it was still during World War II. And it became clear that there needed to be a definite system in place for how this was going to work going forward. Because that wasn't it. So this was one of the things where It was not that the mood of the country had changed, it's that the document itself was insufficient for the real world. So it's not so much a change or a deletion so much as it is a clarification, a making things more specific and precise. Because, hot take, the Constitution as written in 1789 is an imperfect document.
Gasp!
I know, it's a heresy. But it's also a fact. Whether people like it or not, the Constitution as written is an imperfect document.
Are you saying that the people, the founding fathers of the 1700s, couldn't realize what life would be like in the 2000s?
Well, it's not even just that. It's that they didn't think of every contingency. The founding fathers were not omniscient, even for the world as it was in 1789. Because, let's be real, under the system of government they had been in under their birth, what happened when George III was unable to perform the office of king?
Oh yeah, he had the dementia too, or whatever he had.
Yeah, there's a lot of historical discussion about exactly what he had. But whatever it was, he was mentally incapacitated for years. And so what happens? Well, his son steps in because it's a monarchy, and that's how monarchies work.
Hey, question though. At this point, did the king still have any power, or was starting going to the parliament at this point?
The king still had power, but he didn't have ultimate authority. The power of the king was higher then than it is now. But it wasn't as high as it would have been a couple of centuries earlier.
Okay. So it was starting to transition. Because I heard a lot of people during this thing, if they're, a lot of people, some people said they were rebelling against the king, other people said they were rebelling against parliament here.
They didn't really see that much of a distinction. Because the election of parliament was still not quite democratic. So a lot of members of parliament were in there because they were cronies of the king in some way. There's a season 3 Blackadder episode where the Prince Regent is trying to get his allowance increased. And the way he plans to do it is by stacking parliament.
Okay. So I remember that this is after the Charles I feud, the parliament thing, so I don't know if the parliament had gotten more power by this point 100 years later.
Oh yeah. So parliament obviously gained quite a lot of power in the years immediately following the reign of Charles I, in as much as there was no king. There was a Lord Protector who was absolutely not a king, and the fact that his son followed him should not be taken to mean he was a king. But under Charles II, he tried to pull back some power from Parliament for the monarchy, in part because he spent a lot of years in France, and France had a very different setup, which is part of why there was a French Revolution. Parliament was in a battle with the monarch for a while about who was going to be the ultimate authority. And in these years, it was becoming clear that Parliament was going to have more power, but it was also true that the monarch could set things in Parliament. For one thing, the House of Lords still had a lot more power in those days. And so an easy way to stack Parliament was to ennoble your friends.
This is probably why even today the British monarchy is still around, even though most of the other ones have gone bye-bye.
Yeah. Partially the British monarchy exists for tourist dollars these days. I don't know if they bring in more than they drain. That's a conversation that you'd have to have with a British economist. And I am neither of those things. But it is true that a lot of people who visit the UK want to, see the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace and things like that. And they'll go to the UK for major events in the monarchy, weddings and funerals and christenings and things.
Yeah, well, they're finally about my age, because I think the current Prince of Wales is like a year or two younger than me.
I remember his parents' wedding, but again, I'm a little bit older than you are. He's not that much younger than I am, but he looks older, so that's nice.
I know, he looks he's bald. He's already balding.
He took after his mom as a kid, and then as he got older, he got hit hard by his father's genetics. It's been interesting to watch.
That's weird, because his father still has his hair.
Yeah, I know. I don't know where the balding came from. I believe that male pattern baldness is often carried on the maternal line, so it would be funny if that's the one thing he strongly has from his mother. I don't remember. Was Prince Philip bald? Probably.
I'll look it up. But yeah. But so we might have a millennial king before we have a millennial president.
It is theoretically possible, yes. Prince Philip balded a little bit, but not as dramatically as his grandsons. Well, no, Harry's still keeping a lot of his hair. So yeah.
All right, but yeah, all right. Okay, off of monarchy and back to presidency. Anything else to say about this particular topic?
Nope, not really.